So, debunked the debunking, I think. Hello, everyone, and especially my 4 subscribers. So, happy Earth Day! This is one of my favorite holidays because if you do not know, I am a huge environmental nut. And yes, most of the time on my channel I do video game plays. There are not a lot of quick play games regarding environmentalism that are good. They're not incredibly fun. A lot of the games with an environmental focus take a long time to play and are just very, very heavy. And eventually I would like to play one of them on my channel. So in lieu of a video game today, unfortunately, I'm actually going to play Debunking Myths from an average environmentalist. I'm aware that I'm not an environmental scientist, but I come across things all the time from people that think that they're environmental scientists or are heavily swayed against environmentalism for financial reasons, and they come out with articles, they come out with questions, they come out with, just anything that you can put into the internet to say environmentalism is a bad thing. So I looked up a couple of subjects, found some articles, found some questions, and I'm going to sort of debunk them and explain why they don't actually make sense. So, let's get started. Alright, so the first one that we're going to talk about is EVs. So for those of you that don't know, an EV is an electric vehicle. Basically, it's like a giant go-kart. They look just like normal cars, they perform exactly the same as normal cars. The only thing is that they don't use petroleum to any caliber. I found a nifty little article, granted it was from 2017, but I found a nifty little article called Debunking Debunked Electric Car Myths. But for those that don't quite get the double negative, it basically is saying, oh no, these car myths are totally true. And he hits 5 points in his article that, when I read them, the rhetoric in them was insanely biased on financial gain, which I thought was kind of funny, mainly because his first point was, 1. Electric cars are too expensive. In his article, he claims that the average electric car is between $30,000 and $35,000. So I am an EV owner, and my car was worth roughly $10,000. And so I was kind of taken aback when this person is claiming that they're 3 times that. Granted, I understand this was written 2 years ago. They might have been a little pricier 2 years ago, but I can't imagine them going down that much. So I actually looked up a bunch of different brands of electric vehicles, and I found that most of them were roughly $10,000 to $15,000. Totally run-of-the-mill, works fine, great car. Which, to me, $10,000 to $15,000 for essentially a brand spanking new car, that sounds like a pretty good deal. And so I was wondering where he got this $30,000 to $35,000 from. And so while I was looking, I did find a couple of EVs that were worth that, except they weren't EVs. Most of the cars that were priced in and around that range between $30,000 and $50,000 were hybrids. Very different. A hybrid uses both electric and gas. And so essentially in a hybrid, you have to do all of the maintenance, all of the care, that you would do in a gas-powered vehicle, with the added bonus of having an extra battery that can get you a few extra miles. Very cool, but it's not an EV. I did find a couple EVs priced around the $30,000 to $35,000 range, and those were Teslas, the insane higher end of EVs. So, debunked the debunking, I think. Essentially, this guy was looking at the highest end type, but a majority of them are priced around the $10,000 to $15,000, which is average, except for the fact that you look at these cars, They're all newer, they all have more features, so you're really kind of getting more bang for your buck with them. On top of that fact, gas alone is a huge factor for a lot of people that get these. I know that my last car that I owned, I was spending, I'll say roughly $150 to $200 a month in gas. Like that didn't even include like paying for the car. So the fact that my car payment is supplemented by my savings of not having to spend any money on gas. And people will argue and say, oh, well, yeah, but you see that in your electric bill. Actually, you don't. Because my electric bill actually hasn't gone up literally anything, and I charge my car 2 to 3 times a week. My car goes about 80 miles on a full charge. Per mile, roughly, it adds 4 cents onto your bill. So, just going by that, if I had every single day, if I had a dead car battery pulling in and I charged it 100% at 4 cents per mile for about 31 days, I'm looking at, I want to say that'll be like a $90 to $100 bill. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's about supplemented, I guess. I mean, I still would feel like I'm saving about $50 to $100 compared to what I was paying with a gas vehicle. However, in real life, I don't need to charge every single day. I don't drive 80 miles every single day. I charge 2 to 3 times a day, which brings that number down substantially. That means essentially I'm charging for 8 days as opposed to 31. So whatever that math comes out to, you're saving quite a bit. Like, that's just a good economic thing as well as an ecologic thing. So debunked that. 2, it's a hassle to charge. Do you remember every night to plug your phone in? If you answered yes, you can own an EV and it's no hassle. It's really not difficult. I live in an apartment complex right now, and I can charge mine every single night just like out my window. It's not a hassle. Debunked. 3, it's not reliable in the cold. So this one, particularly in his article, was geared towards New England. I don't live in New England, so I can't speak to this personally. But in his article, he claims that when you use the heater in an EV, it takes 40% of your battery. That is false. Once again, I'm aware that this was made in 2017. However, I want to say my vehicle is a 2016, and whenever I use the heater, it takes off maybe 4 miles, which is not 40% of my battery. Debunked. Draco decided he wanted to come play. So 4 is that there's no advantage to switching from gasoline for the environment. His article basically said EVs cut greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 70%, which is true, because it doesn't cut it 100%, because if you are still plugging it into the grid, then obviously we use petroleum and coal to power our grid still. So you're not getting rid of 100% of that waste. But his argument for this is essentially his first argument, and he just says this is too expensive an option to get rid of 50 to 70% of your greenhouse gas emissions, which, no, it's not. So, debunked. And 5, if I don't own a car, why should I care? This one I'm going to give to him. If you don't own a car, in my opinion, you're doing your part. You're taking public transit, you're reducing your carbon footprint as best you can. I know a lot of people that don't have cars, that's not exactly their reasoning. Their reason most likely is like financial, or that they live in a big city, so it doesn't make sense when you can walk everywhere, when you can just take public transit. But yes, so that one I'm not going to disagree on. Except that in his article, he once again wouldn't shut up about like, oh, it's so expensive. It's too expensive a way to get around. And I get it. If you don't own a car, then yes, any car purchase is expensive. But as we've debunked twice now, an EV is not the most expensive version of a car. By any means. Alright, so the next article I'm going to look at is from the Christian Worldview. This one gets me in a weird way. The idea that Christians, that like a large portion of the Christian population doesn't believe in environmentalism really gets my goat in a weird way. Because for a long time I was a somewhat devout Christian. I very much cherished my walk with God and yada yada. And that fueled my environmentalism so much because in my eyes, I was like, why would I take this beautiful place that God gave me, his beautiful green earth, why would I take it and pollute it and cause it pain and, make it less beautiful by doing all of these things that humans do to it? Essentially, this article lists 7 false claims from humanistic environmental groups, which is 1, global warming is occurring, it's settled science. 2, humans are causing it and human population is unsustainable. 3, catastrophic consequences are taking place. 4, we must stop using fossil fuels and instead use clean energy. 5, carbon dioxide is a pollutant to the environment. 6, the poor are hurt most by climate change. Okay, I read that wrong the first time, and I thought it said the poor are hurting climate change, which I didn't quite understand, but now it makes more sense. And 7, global authority is required to save our planet. All of these things are fact. At least as I read them, they're fact. I mean, I will say the poor are hurt most by climate change. That one, I'm not quite as sure about. I think that might be a little bit opinionated. I want to believe it's fact, but that might just be my opinion. The rest of these, however, global warming is occurring, it's a settled science, yes, they all agree. Most of them, I will say most of them agree. The point whatever percent that don't disagree with it. There's no scientist that will say global warming isn't occurring. There are scientists that will say the world is too large for us to comprehensively, undeniably claim that global warming exists. Which I can understand their justification in that, and at the same time, the entire point of science is to make things happen on a small scale so we can explain the larger world. That's science. Anyways, I digress. So all 7 of these essentially are true. And this article says, well, that can't be because God wouldn't give it to us if it was going to hurt us. So take that, ya environmental hippies. Yep, God never put anything on the earth that killed people. Never. Particularly never, drown all of his children, except one family, and 2 of each animal. That didn't happen. He definitely didn't call upon that to happen to hurt humanity. Which I get it, that story wasn't about hurting humanity, it was sort of like a reset. But still, there are so many examples in the Bible of this vengeful, almost vindictive God. So for this to basically make the claim of nope, God loves us, so these 7 things that you're claiming to be facts can't be facts because God would never do that to us. That's not it's not well researched. That's not an argument. That's a heavy-handed opinion that's not based in any sort of analytic proof. So yes, and I'm just gonna go back to that when I was when I was very into religion. Religion made it more impactful for me to want to be good to the earth because I wanted to take care of this gift that God gave us. I didn't want to hurt it or continue to make it worse in any way, which is how I feel most Christians should view environmentalism, is that these are people saying, I love this planet. I love what we were given. Let's make sure we keep it clean. Just me. Anyway. Okay, and for our last one, this one's going to be real fun. What makes this really fun is that while I was researching it, I found out that a blog plagiarized another author. I thought that was really interesting. So this last topic that we're going to discuss is the conception that recycling hurts the environment. First of all, to my understanding, the way in which recycling hurts the environment is that most of our recycling and our garbage and stuff gets shipped overseas. We sell most of it to China, which is not a thing that's happening anymore. China recently said we're not going to be taking this anymore. Over there, they would turn it into clothes and products and other stuff. During the transport from the United States to China or to wherever is purchasing all of our garbage and our recycling, things would get lost essentially in the ocean, which is how things like Garbage Island happened. And Garbage Island has like a weird misconception about it too. People think it's like this swirling mass of like hard plastic and stuff, which granted, there's that there. But more of it is like, it's more like a weird plastic soup. Like if you've ever left a plastic bag out in the sun and it sort of like disintegrated, like if you picked it up and it sort of just like fell apart, that's essentially what happened to this island, if you will, is that there's all this garbage and then it's sitting out there in the sun and it's being soaked with salt water. And it sort of just all like melts and meshes together and it becomes this really disgusting mass. It doesn't all just stay put, obviously. It drifts out into the water and makes the ocean a lot less inhabitable for our fishy friends. But yes, anyways, I digress. So I found this article of how recycling hurts the environment. So yes, number 10, contaminants gets around. Oh yeah, so this is 10 reasons. So essentially this list is going to be 10 reasons that recycling is hurting the environment, and they're just ridiculous. Anyway, 10, contaminants get around. Okay. So basically, this says that by making and, having them be in existence, they obviously contain contaminants. Which, yes, throwing them away and recycling them in no way gets rid of the contaminants. I'd still rather have something recycled and be put to a better use than just sit in a landfill and still have that contaminants be there and getting into the soil and yada yada and what have you. So, debunked. Because, it's not untrue, but it has nothing to do with, recycling hurting the environment. 9, air pollution is still a problem. And people still die, and cancer still happens, and yada yada. Air pollution and recycling are, this point basically says that, will garbage trucks and recycling trucks still have carbon offsets? Yes. And that would have been there anyway. Because if you threw away everything that you recycled, then guess what? The garbage trucks need to still pick that up. So you're not getting rid of anything by not recycling. Paper sludge is just disgusting. This literally, this has nothing to do with recycling. Yeah, it goes through a process where it's basically all sludged together, and then reprocessed and repurposed. 7, most plastics can't be recycled. Okay, cool. So hard plastics can be recycled. There are different numbers of plastics, and depending on where you live, certain numbers can't be recycled because they just either don't have the resources or don't have the materials of which, I mean, it comes down, yeah, to they don't have the resources for it. That's just a very broad, bold statement to say that, like, oh, across the board, like, you can only recycle a couple plastics. No. Look at where you live, essentially. 6, current methods aren't effective. I mean, we're trying to create better, more effective ways to recycle. However, their justification is that it's super expensive to recycle. Yeah, it's also super expensive to produce. This is another person that's just going down to brass tacks with the money and saying, like, oh, well, recycling costs us so much money, so it's better to just keep producing the same items. 5, oil refineries create toxic chemicals. And that has to do with recycling? 4, recycling barely dents demand. Yeah, and this one basically says that when we repurpose things, we're not doing it at an efficient enough level to completely supplement creating new things. Like, once again, that's not untrue, but that isn't hurting the environment. That's not recycling hurting the environment. If anything, it's taking a percentage of needing to make new things and replacing it with what's already there. 3, some products are better left unrecycled. So at first glance with that statement, it sounds like it's just saying some things you shouldn't recycle because you just shouldn't recycle them. And I'm like, okay. To actually read that point, it talks about how all of our paper products, or most of our paper products, are taken from like acres and acres of, forest and rainforest and stuff each year, which is true, which is why we want to recycle and repurpose these things. That way we don't have to keep taking from, these natural places. More recycling will actually reduce the demand for those forests. Yep, it would be such a shame if there wasn't a demand for the rainforest. So it's not like they help us in any other way. So, we'll probably just get rid of them if we don't have a demand for paper. Number 2, all-in-one recycling is inefficient. Once again, this is a financial thing. It basically states that because certain cities offer all-in-one recycling, which is where you can basically just throw everything into a recycle bin and it'll be processed for you at a different place. It's saying that that's bad, or it's recycling hurting the environment because then cities have to spend money to get sorting machines. So essentially, it gets rid of another truck, which was one of their earlier points that was bad for the environment. This was someone I feel that was like really grasping for straws to get something on Listverse, so they wanted to do something that was controversial, and then they just grasped at straws for, things that could be considered bad for the environment. Which, like, granted, yes, big trucks and machines are bad for the environment, but there's, these aren't ramifications of recycling. They're repurposed for recycling. These trucks would still exist, except they'd be picking up garbage way you would just go to a landfill. These machines would probably still exist because with all the extra garbage that would be going to the dump, you still need machines to compact them, to place them, to move them. Yeah. Alright, and number 1, recycling gives false promises. And this point, I understand what they were going for. But it wasn't researched. It was a heavy-handed opinion. And essentially, the false promise that it gives is that when you buy something that's post-consumer or is made out of recycled material, then people feel better about making the purchase, so they'll buy it more. That's not true. Because at least in my personal experience, I do know people that will almost exclusively buy, myself included, will buy like secondhand, recycled, post-consumer whatevers. I don't buy an excess of them because I feel better about my purchase. I buy that certain brand because it makes me feel better as a consumer to buy a product that's less impactful on the environment. Yeah, I don't understand their logic in this fully. Because if you're using something that's made out of recycled material or is post-consumer, then even if you're using more of it, then you're still, that recycling didn't go to waste. In fact, that proves that the recycling went to good use. So recycling in no way hurt the environment there. So yeah, these were 3 articles that that were people trying to, I guess, debunk environmentalism. And they make no sense. Alright, anyways, that's where I'm gonna leave it for today. I'm so sorry that this video is late. I know I try and get videos out by 10 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This morning, however, oh, my hair's looking funky. This morning, however, I went and I volunteered with some of my coworkers, and we picked up a bunch of trash in an open field for like 2.5 hours. So that obviously ate up quite a bit of time. I spent some time this week and as well as some time today like trying to look for interesting environmental games, which is kind of what led me to this video, and finding these articles. So yeah, like I said, I'm sorry that this is so late, but happy Earth Day, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!